Last file, a man from Earth killed the god of the abyss and took his sword. What nobody said out loud is that the sword had already done this before. Twice. To better owners. Here is the claim. All Black the Necrosword is not the weapon in this story. It is the character. Every single being who has held it believed the crusade was their own. Every single one of them ended up doing the same job, and the sword has outlasted all of them, including the god who forged it. 4 wielders all cited. Watch which one is the constant. One thing before we start, because it will save the comments some typing. This is the comics version. The film rewrote the origin substantially, and none of what follows is about that. Knull made it out of himself in the dark before the universe. And I left a detail out of the last file that I should not have. He did not simply forge it from his own shadow. He tempered it inside the head of the celestial he had just beheaded, quenched the blade in the skull of the first god it ever killed. That is the birth of this object, and it tells you what it was for before anyone ever picked it up. One more thing about it that reframes half of Marvel. All Black is the first symbiote. Venom, Carnage, the whole species, the god that spawned them, all of it descends from a sword. Knull carried it through his war on the gods of creation. It earned a name doing it, the Godslayer. And then something happened that almost nobody tells you about, and it is the most important event in the sword's history. Case 1. Knull, the Maker. A group of golden armored gods finally catches him and puts him down. He is incapacitated, beaten, and All Black leaves. Not lost in the battle, not taken off him as a trophy. The sword detaches from the being who created it out of his own body and goes and bonds with somebody else. Sit with that for a second, because everything after it is a footnote. The god who made this thing, who pulled it out of his own darkness and called it his firstborn, gets knocked down once, and his own weapon walks. That is the first case, and it is already the whole argument. If the sword can abandon the person who made it, it was never anybody's. Case 2. Gorr, a misotheistic alien on a dying world, who hates the gods for very good reasons and has no power to do anything about it. All Black finds him, and what follows is one of the great runs in Marvel Comics. Gorr spends millennia killing gods across the cosmos and becomes the God Butcher, the most famous deicide in the universe. Here is what the story is careful to say. Gorr unwittingly followed in Knull's footsteps. He thought the crusade was his. He thought the hatred was his, and the mission was his, and the sword was the instrument of it. He was walking a path that had already been walked, carrying the thing that had walked it before, and he never knew. And then it gets worse. Gorr dies, and his consciousness is stored inside All Black. Later, King Loki reaches into the sword and pulls him back out of it. So it does not only corrupt the people who hold it, it keeps them. Somewhere in that blade, the God Butcher is still in there. Case 3, and this is the one that closes the argument. You could dismiss Gorr. You could say the sword found a man who was already halfway to being a monster and simply gave him the means, that it needs a grievance to work with, and Gorr brought his own. So look at Galactus. Galactus has no crusade. He is closer to a law of physics than a person, hunger with a shape, a fixed point the universe is built around. There is nothing in him to exploit. All Black bonded to him secretly and corrupted him anyway. He became Black Galactus, the Butcher of Worlds. And in the King Thor era, it reaches Loki and turns him into something obsessed with killing the universe itself. A god of darkness, a grieving alien, a cosmic constant, a trickster. Nothing about these 4 is alike, and all 4 ended up doing the same job. The sword does not need a reason. It supplies one. So count what stayed. Knull is ash. Gorr is dead twice, and part of him is filed inside the blade. Galactus was restored. Loki was stopped. The sword has never been permanently destroyed. It restores itself, and it has never, not once, stayed with anyone. Which brings us to the ending, and the ending is the argument saying itself out loud. Eddie Brock kills Knull. He earns it. He does what gods could not. And this channel spent a whole file arguing that it matters that a man did it. And then he takes Knull's blade. And Knull's title. The man who ended the King in Black became the King in Black, holding the King in Black's sword. The sword lost its god and had a replacement before the body cooled. Now the objection, and it is a good one. It's a symbiote. Bonding to hosts is what symbiotes do. Reading intent into that is like saying a virus is ambitious. That is fair, and it makes the claim narrower and much harder to argue with. Whether all black chooses is not provable. What is provable is that it lasts. It has never been permanently destroyed. It restores itself. It has never remained with a single owner. And across 4 beings with nothing in common, different species, different power tiers, different motives, one of them not really a person at all, the outcome was identical every time. The constant in this story is not the wielder. All black is not Gorr's sword. It was never Knull's sword either. It is a thing that has been passing through gods for longer than the universe has existed, and it is currently in the hands of a man from Cleveland, and Gorr is still inside it, filed away in the blade until somebody reached in and pulled him out, which is a story of its own. Next file, the god butcher who was kept in a weapon.